guys, welcome to the new series. In this series we're going to be talking a little bit about pure OCD. So for those of you that don't know, this is a form of OCD without the compulsion. So it's more based on the obsessive intrusive thoughts. Now there is mental rituals that come with this, but obviously unlike a compulsion you can't see this, so it's not evident. So basically everything's going on inside the head rather than in the outside world. I've had this disorder since about the age of 7, I would say, is the first time I remember intrusive thoughts. So I had intrusive thoughts regarding harm, which was quite distressing because obviously I didn't know what was going on and if these were real thoughts and if this was me. The question was I evil for having these thoughts? And obviously that was a worry for me, so I had to speak to my parents about that, who obviously it wasn't very well known back then, and you definitely don't expect someone as young as 7 to be going through something like OCD, so they just sort of thought I was going through a strange phase and interpreted it as something else, which I can't blame them because a lot of parents would probably think that in that situation. It is a bit of a tricky one. After this, it pretty much went away till I was about 13, and then ever since then I've had spikes of it and still get them now, and had one the other day. So yeah, it's still very much present in my life. So I just want to speak to you about some of those experiences, and there's some certain parts of the disorder that I'm going to be spending more time on in this series. So there's a lot of misconceptions about this disorder. So people sort of throw the word OCD around sometimes. So, you know, if someone likes to be clean and likes things tidy, I've heard the expression like, oh, I'm so OCD with that. And it's not a cool personality quirk. It's not just wanting to be a bit tidy. And people often think when you say OCD, it means hand washing, it means cleanliness, but for me it's not been like that at all. It's all gone on sort of inside my head. It's not something that you could see on the outside necessarily, and it's been debilitating at times. I wish it was just me wanting to be a bit clean and tidy, but no, I've spent hours and hours and hours not been able to move because of this disorder, not been able to do anything but think the obsessive thoughts. So it does need to be taken seriously. And the thing with these misconceptions or misuse of the word OCD, you know, makes it kind of hard for us people who have it, because it's almost downplaying how bad it is, especially when many people use the term that they're so OCD, because who's going to take it seriously if the term is thrown around all the time? The worst thing is that there's no known cause for this disorder. So it's been thought that it could be due to chemical imbalance in the brain, but obviously there's no sort of evidence or testing for this. No one knows from one individual to the next what's caused this for them, which means there's no treatment option other than trying to manage it. So you never get rid of those thoughts, you just try and manage them in ways that cause you less distress, basically, and lessen the anxiety, which is pretty tricky at times. And it often makes other disorders worse, and they all interlink into one. So I've got generalised anxiety disorder alongside this, so obviously the pure OCD makes that worse, and then that makes the OCD worse, so it's hard to tell which one's actually which sometimes. The obsessive thoughts often have themes based around them, which they can be different for anyone, but there's a few that are like the general themes that they tend to take on, and I've experienced a few of them. So they're like harm, OCD, which I mentioned, you know, that happened at a young age. There's things like sexuality and relationships and health. So I'm going to be talking more in depth about the relationship side of it, because for me it's mostly been what we call relationship OCD. So it is pure OCD about relationships. People, you might hear ROCD or relationship OCD. That's what it's referring to. So that's been the main one for me in adulthood, and the one that I've struggled with the most, really. So I'm going to do a separate episode on that, but I just want to touch on the other ones a little bit. So, like, in terms of the sexuality one, that kind of spiked for me at school, where I was convinced that I was a lesbian, that I was attracted to another girl at school, having to admit these things to my mum, and it wasn't like your normal, I know that when people do have these genuine feelings and they do come out to parents, they're anxious, but it wasn't like this. It was more of an OCD thought. So anyone who knows me now knows that I'm not a lesbian. I've been with men, I've only been with men. But the fact that this thought was so anxiety provoking in my head links it exactly to the OCD side of it, and the sort of check-in and the reassurance. We'll talk about that in a minute. So there's that one, and then there's obviously the harm one that I've mentioned before, which that's only cropped up a few times since. So one of the times I was struggling with my mood anyway, because I'd just had a breakup and I was living in a different town on my own, no family around. I was about an hour and a half away from anybody that I knew, and I got this sort of obsessive thought about harming myself, and it wasn't that I was suicidal or that I wanted to harm myself, but it was this constant thought in my head of what if you do it, and it led to me not trusting myself, which meant that anything in the house that I thought I could harm myself with, I had to hide away. I put it on top of cupboards so that I'd have to make more of an effort to get to those items to do that, because it wasn't like I want self-harm. It was more of like, what if my thoughts and brain forces me to do something like that, because that's how strong the OCD thoughts are sometimes. They really push you into believing something. It's also come after sort of weirdly watching scary films. So if there's scary films where someone in there harms people close to them or gets possessed, I know it sounds strange, but for example, then I get this huge anxiety and fear that I'm suddenly going to be possessed and go around doing something like that. So I pretty much stopped watching all them films when I was a teenager, because that was when it was worse than in early adulthood, so like early 20s or 18, 19, something like that. In terms of the obsessive thoughts around relationships, I'm not going to go into that one this time. That's going to be next episode, because I've got a lot to say on that one, really. And the other theme is health. So I've also obviously experienced this. Anyone who knows me knows I'm always worrying about this still to this day. Mainly if I've got an event coming up, like I've got a night out or a gig or something, I get this fear that I'm going to get ill beforehand and have to let people down and not be able to go. And then I'll look into every feeling that I have in my body, and everything is hyper-focused. So a slight headache, I'll be hyper-focused on it. And in my head, it'll be something massive, like a blood clot. What if I end up in hospital? What if it's a migraine and it makes me vomit? All that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's very much apparent still. Not as bad as it used to be. I'll probably do a separate episode on that one as well, because there's quite a bit to talk about in that one. But basically, what happens with the thoughts is it just creates a massive anxiety, tearfulness, depression, guilt around the thoughts. So a lot of the time I'd feel so guilty for having some of the thoughts that I've had, and what do they mean. And the mental rituals that come from that is basically like constant checking of things, checking how you feel by carrying out certain actions. So it's not that the action's a compulsion, it's just that you're mentally checking how you feel at the time of doing that action to see if it supports the thought in your head, to find out if the thought's real or your OCD. Also, reassurance seeking has been a huge one for me. So poor Sophie, and I'm referring to Sophie that I spoke about, the illustrator, in the last, well, not the last episode, the one before. So she's my best friend, and over the years I've done a lot of reassurance seeking from her, and I would send her huge essays of text, one after the other, wanting all these answers, wanting this reassurance of these thoughts. And as soon as she gave that reassurance and pretty much tried to answer it, I would then have another thought, and it's just, this cycle keeps going and going and going. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, because I'm going to do an episode on tips, because it's not as bad now for me as it used to be, and I've found ways to manage that, and it has been hard, but they definitely do work. And another thing is Googling. I used to Google everything all the time about relationships, about what this thought means, what that thought means, and it is honestly the worst thing to do, because Google doesn't take into consideration that you have OCD and that these thoughts are probably from that. So yeah, it's pretty tough. I'm managing it quite well now, but yeah, I just wanted to share my experience of this, sort of to raise awareness so that people do understand, so that we can come together, talk about it, and also so people stop throwing the term around, because it is a serious thing. So yeah, on a lighter note, it's lovely weather. Go and have a nice walk if you can. Enjoy the day. I'm saying this, but when I post this in a few days' time, it might be peeing it down, but who knows. Anyway, thank you for watching. See you soon.